Next thought. I want to go to basically you go 1 through 11, and you're going to find 5 SEC teams, which, listen, I'm fine with that, but it's pretty clear that, like, hey, the coalition and that wall is built right now. And so the SEC is dominating these rankings. And by the way, maybe rightly so. I think that league this year is definitely the best league in the country. They're great at the top. They've got 2 other teams that I think are playing really good football, in LSU and Ole Miss. And the coalition is there. 5 teams in the top 11, I guess I should say. But what really stands out to me is this LSU at 10. So LSU at 10 is a bit of an outlier. The way that we have viewed these teams, even their resume, all in all, because they're the highest rated 2-loss team in the country. Not Utah, which has been the highest rated 2-loss team for every other poll that we have. No, LSU, all of a sudden, 4 spots ahead of Utah. And it got me thinking a little bit that this LSU ranking is a huge deal, because that LSU ranking at 10 basically builds a wall behind Tennessee. Even if LSU loses, like let's say this week to Alabama, well, one, that's, Alabama. And so are they going to drop that far? Probably not. Now, Texas is a 3-loss team. They're at 24, but being at 10, if you lose to Alabama, and let's say it's even close, LSU's not getting past 20. Right? They're not dropping 10 spots. That would be unprecedented in the college football playoff rankings. So they'd still be in there, which builds a wall behind Tennessee. Because if Tennessee loses to Georgia, well, Georgia's top 3. And it would be on the road at Georgia. And Tennessee would still have that really good win, great win, best win in the country against Alabama. And they'd still have that, what now looks to be maybe the second best win in the country, going on the road and beating LSU soundly in their building. So now you've got Tennessee, and they've got this backstop of LSU because of that win. Their strength of schedule is fantastic. They're 2-0 against the college football playoff top 25. So everything is going right for Tennessee. I had heard from a lot of Tennessee fans, and they were kind of like leery about, like, man, we're going to have to beat Georgia, aren't we? Because we can't be a team that doesn't win the division and still go to the playoff. They probably still had a path to the playoff not beating Georgia before, but now they definitely have a path to the playoff even without beating Georgia because of the backstop of LSU. So how does LSU get ranked 10th? Well, let's get into that for a moment, because you kind of have to understand how the sausage is made in the playoff committee. I believe that what happened with LSU is that they got stuck with Ole Miss. This committee valued Ole Miss, and by the way, rightly so. I think Ole Miss is a good football team. They really valued Ole Miss, but then that game, the last game that LSU played, LSU beats Ole Miss, and they do it fairly soundly. So here's kind of, and this is going to be hard to explain, but I'm going to try, and I hope I do a good job at this. To understand what happened there, and then to also put that against what seems to be the same situation with USC and Utah, and yet you see USC at 9 and Utah at 14. Well, okay, so they're clearly honoring head-to-head with LSU over Ole Miss, but not with Utah over USC, even though LSU is a 2-loss team and Ole Miss is a 1-loss team. You see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make much sense until you understand how these rankings are actually made. So let me try to do this quickly. Okay, so the first thing you have to know, every committee member comes in with their top 25 filled out, and they hand it in. And then those are tabulated, and they put up, hey, here's the top 25 as you see them, like you would make any other AP poll any week of the season. Okay, so they put that up briefly, and then they take it down and they say, okay, let's look at it in sections. And we're going to start at the top. So let's take a look at the top 4 teams. And they put them up there. And remember, that's just kind of an aggregate of what everyone's ballot was when they walked into the room. So then they would ask the question, like, are we okay with this? And anybody that has an objection could raise an objection. They would put up resumes next to each other. They would maybe watch some film, and they go through it and they pore over the data, but only with that section of teams up and against one another. Okay, and so then what happens is they would give you another ballot. At that point, the ballot would have 6 spots. So you've been talking about 4 teams so far, and then there's 6 spots on the ballot, and they say, rank your top 6. Now, this is where it gets interesting, is that you rank your top 6, and then once those get tabulated and go up on the board, then they say like, okay, are we okay with the top 2? Are we good with this? And they say, okay, yes, Tennessee, Ohio State, you are 1 and 2. And they put them up there then in stone. Okay, so now those are out of deliberation at that point, and you move down. So it's always this window of 4 or 5 teams that you're talking about and arguing about, right? And comparing against one another. And it kind of starts to slide down. So then that same process occurs with the next 4 or 5 teams, and then you solidify the 3rd and 4th team and maybe the 5th team, and the window slides down. And then teams are added based on those new ballots that are then thrown in there. And that's what eventually builds the top 25. Well, then you can see that USC got included before Utah was up for deliberation. That's how Utah is that many spots behind USC. Whereas LSU and Ole Miss are clearly put up right next to each other on the resume, and there's a head-to-head win right there that they've got to honor. So how are you not honoring Utah's win over USC, but you are honoring LSU's win over Ole Miss? It's about the process. Now, you can say it's flawed. I'm just telling you, like, I did the exercise. That's how it's done. And I probably didn't even explain it all that well. I'm just telling you that I highly doubt Utah was up on the board of 4 teams or 5 teams against USC. They were never deliberated against one another, whereas LSU and Ole Miss absolutely were. Therefore, they honored LSU's win and not Utah's win. So that's how that happens. So then you've got LSU at 10 as a clear outlier, and now they are an absolute backstop for Tennessee. So all this tells me is there's a ripe scenario for 3 SEC teams in the college football playoff. Absolutely. Not a doubt in my mind. Those rankings right there in this first iteration, 5 SEC teams in the top 11, there could absolutely be 3 SEC teams in the playoff this year. And it wouldn't take that much, by the way. It wouldn't take that much at all. Georgia beats Tennessee this week in a really good game in Athens. Then Alabama beats Georgia in Atlanta in the SEC championship game in a thriller. And let's say Clemson were to lose somehow, TCU were to lose somehow, Ohio State and Michigan are each going to play each other, so one of them would have a loss. And now, all of a sudden, even with a 1-loss Pac-12 team up there, you would be deliberating basically for 1 or 2 spots, and there would be 3 SEC teams just sitting there with great resumes and only 1 loss. So that's why that's important. What you need to know, the second thing from last night's playoff ranking, the SEC coalition is strong, and that wall is strong for Tennessee.